Hello, this is Mike Burek, your host and producer of Krynytsia, The Well, a podcast series about topics of interest to Ukrainians around the world. Today is Wednesday, October 30th, 2024. This episode is produced for The Ukrainian Weekly, a newspaper published in English for the global Ukrainian community since 1933. Our guests today are Peter Solowka and Len Liggins, who are the founders of the British punk rock band, The Ukrainians. Welcome, Peter and Len. How are you?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. To start off with, can we get some information about educational and professional backgrounds for both of you?
Well, educationally, I suppose the British system's a bit different from the American one. But I stayed in school till I was 18, did A levels, went to university, studied biology. Nothing to do with music there anywhere, is there? Um, and in that time, all through that time, I was obviously very interested in music, but those are my educational qualifications.
Yeah, for me, I studied modern Slavonic languages at the University of Leeds here in the UK. Previous to that, my kind of professional background had been working in PR, really, for environmental and arts organizations.
Peter, what are your Ukrainian roots?
Well, my father was from Ukraine. He was born in 1925 in a small village called Havrylyak near the town of Kolomia in western Ukraine. He ended up in Britain in about 1947, I think, settled in the north, where quite a few Ukrainian families did in the old industries of cotton, which were there. And he set up with some friends a small Ukrainian club. Now, I mean, really small, probably about 10 families. And that's where I learned the Ukrainian that I know, which for me mainly was music. That's where I learned my tunes and my melodies and my emotional connection to the country, really, from there.
And Len, what is your ethnic background and why did you get involved with a band singing in Ukrainian?
that's that's a short question, but a long answer. I'll try and keep it as brief as I can. My mother was Irish, and my father's family, going back to late 18th century, probably 1790s, lived in England, but appear to have come over from Bosnia Herzegovina to work in ribbon making factories in Coventry in the Midlands. At least that's what I believe, having had a DNA test that confirmed that my father's genetic background was from the southern Slavic area, and that his DNA was on going down the male line was predominantly Bosnian Herzegovinian.
So the Ukrainians band was formed more than 30 years ago in 1991, and apparently some members of the group had some musical history even before that. Can you describe some of the highlights of the history of the band?
You've got to talk a little bit about the origin, I suppose. I said before I was always interested in music, and I played in lots and lots of bands in the mid 80s, but one of them had quite a degree of success as an independent band. That means basically doing things all our own way and not being involved in major record labels and being very, very individual with our music. And that was a band called The Wedding Present. And the Ukrainians came out of that because me and Len had known each other for a while, and we were playing lots of Ukrainian folk tunes just for fun. And we had a chance to mix those Ukrainian folk tunes with the quite raucous, fast indie guitar style of The Wedding Present on a few radio sessions. And that really became the birth of the group. Got any highlights, Len?
Highlights of the band's history. Well, we've been going for 35 years, so you could say it's absolutely studded with highlights. But one of the highlights for me was the very first record that got released, which was our very first single, Oi Channel, which was a single of the week in the rock magazine NME over here in the UK, playing at the Glastonbury Festival and the WOMAD World Music Festival were more highlights, touring in Germany, touring in Poland.
Well, I suppose the thing is that there's little events that are highlights, and you could, in 35 years, like Len says, you can make a massive list of them all.
Mm.
I suppose the most important thing to me is that it's just, it sounds a bit weird. This is like one big weird highlight because we did something that no other band has really been able to do, and that's we got played on the radio. We sold loads and loads of albums, singing in Ukrainian in England. And as Len says, the first single, the first album that we did to get sort of like national recognition, singing in Ukrainian language in England and getting in national album charts. It's probably the highlight, even though it was a long time ago. It's just been carrying on, really.
And who has your audience been over the years? And has the character of the audience changed over that period of time?
I think we've inevitably some people in some audiences will be of Ukrainian background, but very often they're not. You know, we also have a lot of diverse musical fans, really. Some that are kind of indie rock or punk, folk, world music fans. So we tend to cross quite a few categories, I think. And in the early days, this was quite useful for us because it meant that we might get invited to play at a punk festival or a folk festival or a world music festival, which, you know, kind of multiplied the number of gigs that we got offered, bookings we got in the early days.
Why did you decide to write your new book, The Ukrainians from Kiev to the Cosmos? What is the style of the book? And can you give us some details about it?
It's quite interesting in the way it's put together. The person who has done this book and has suggested it and edited it, its main format is a collaborative book. It's not just a narrative that me and Len have made about our career. Probably about a quarter of it is me and Len telling our story. The rest of it is as many people as possible who've been involved with the Ukrainians, whether it be past band members, people who've worked in the music industry, promoters. But a lot of it is people who are fans of the band who've just written in to tell their stories about seeing the Ukrainians, listening to the Ukrainians, meeting the Ukrainians, traveling with the Ukrainians. It's like a book which is, I suppose you could use the word holistic. It's going all the way around the idea of the Ukrainians from people's personal perspectives and personal experiences. That makes it quite an interesting book, especially for me to read, because you're in a band for 35 years, you think you know what the band is about, and then a book like this comes along, and there are so many different ways of experiencing the Ukrainians and being involved with the Ukrainians. It's quite an eye-opener to me to see this big, broad circle that we call the Ukrainians in its 35-year career.
Len, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that sums it up pretty well. It's like a kaleidoscope, really. You're seeing the band and its history and the things we've done and its music from lots of different directions, and so it makes it far more interesting than if Pete and I had just written the book on our own. And not only the perspectives, but just the information as well. You know, there are things that we've forgotten. You know, and to be reminded of some of those things, or to be told them, not having known them in the first place.
That's definitely the case for large sections of the book for me.
Yeah, it's been quite educational. It's you know, here we are talking about the band on a podcast, and yet most of the information that we've absorbed about our own band of 35 years has come through other people that have contributed to the book.
There's one good example of that. Is when I'd known about 20 years ago that someone said to me that your music, some of the music the Ukrainians got, has been played in space. Now that's all I really knew about it. that someone had played our music in space. I didn't know any details about it. And when we started researching this, we tried to find out, was that actually true, and did it really happen? So we actually picked up lots of details, and there was apparently it is true. There was an astronaut who was on the space station, and twice when she was on the space station, she's got a Ukrainian background, so she chose music to be woken up to in the morning, and on both occasions, on both flights where she was out there, she played tunes by the Ukrainians. So it's good to know that it is actually true that we have produced the first Ukrainian music to be played in space. It's quite a fascinating fact, and the books helps us put a few things like that together.
Very interesting. Have you performed your music in Ukraine and Poland? And if so, what was the audience response there?
Yes, well, we have performed in Ukraine and Poland. In the very early days, we were invited as guests of the Ukrainian Ministry of Culture to do a tour, which took in lots of cities all around Ukraine. The response was great. It seemed very odd that there was a bunch of musicians from the West taking Ukrainian folk music and playing it in Ukraine itself. But the whole thing is that we weren't playing their folk music as they would play it. So we had the combined influence of Western rock music. So it's a hybrid and individual, if not unique, in me. And so they really liked the kind of extra energy and punkiness that we gave to the traditional tunes. And as for Poland, Poland followed a little later. We played quite a lot of tours in Poland over the years, and it seems that what was obvious from not only what people were telling us, but what we were reading in newspapers too, was that the band was encouraging young Poles, instead of looking to the West for their cultural influences and their music influences. It was encouraging certain Poles to look even further east, and I think that was one thing that really surprised us.
There's one thing that I remember about you said how did the music go down? How did people accept it? I suppose we didn't speak when we first went to Ukraine. I didn't really get to speak to many people with Ukrainian background, but I think it's long term when I look at the um, effects that we may have had. Because as Len said, we were the first ones to go out there and take Ukrainian roots music and hit it with Western rhythms and energy. And it must have seemed very strange to the audience there, but I know that many people out there who were artists and musicians watched carefully what we did. And we were definitely the first to do that. But within a few years, there were other musicians doing it too. I'm not saying it's because of us, but I think we were like pioneers in that way. And I look to other bands now who I know speaking to said to us, "Well, you were an influence. You opened the door to this way of treating Ukrainian roots music." I think there's something about that. The extent to it is very, very hard to know how much of that is the case. But I know bands changed the way they played their music after we were there.
Peter and Len, unfortunately, we're just about out of time, but I do have one final question.
Sure.
Has your audience changed at all since the Russian war against Ukraine began in February 2022? And if so, how?
Well, there's been a lot more people with Ukrainian background coming to the shows. When the war first started, we spent the first 2 months of it really doing benefit shows, to raise money for refugees. But even after that, the shows that we've played now seems to have a much larger number of people there who have got Ukrainian background. We hardly ever used to see things like Ukrainian flags at shows. And now when we play shows, there are nearly always people who will bring them. And these are people who have only been in the country for a couple of years because of the situation. So I think that's increasing, yeah. That amount of that sort of thing is increasing.
Len, anything to add on that?
I think I think that is the main change. I think our audience has pretty much been stable for many, many years, but since the main invasion, there have been more Ukrainians, and but also a lot of people coming out, and because Ukraine is in the news a lot, and then they see a band with the name the Ukrainians advertised as playing. Some people are coming out to generally support, and so we've had records available at our gigs that we've sold to raise money for the Disasters Emergency Committee Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal. We've put together a record to raise money for that, and we've raised funds at a whole tour of gigs for that cause too.
Where can our audience go to find out more about the Ukrainians band and also to purchase a book copy?
Our
Right.
website, it's just theukrainians.com.
It's the hyphen Ukrainian.
Yes, the hyphen, yes.
If you go to the Ukrainians.com, you won't end up at our site.
No, you'll get it to a magazine or something, won't you?
Yeah, well, it's the hyphen. So I don't know if you guys use that same term. It's a dash maybe, and then Ukrainians.com.
The other way to find it is if you're not sure what the actual web address is, if you just put in the Ukrainians band, it usually puts us at the top of the list as well.
Great. Thanks for that information. And thank you to both of you for joining us today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Been great talking to you.
I have been speaking with Peter Solowka and Len Liggins, founders of the British punk rock band, the Ukrainians. This episode of Krynytsia was produced for The Ukrainian Weekly, a newspaper published in English for the global Ukrainian community since 1933. I'm Mike Burek, your host and producer of Krynytsia. Until next time, that's all for now.